Hi students, in this video I'm going to talk about the Age of Discovery. There are two rocky promontories, one from the southern coast of Spain and one from the northern coast of Morocco, that jut out at the edge of the Mediterranean. In Greek mythology, these were called the Pillars of Hercules, said to have been placed there by Hercules to warn travelers not to go past these pillars because the seas beyond in the Atlantic were too dangerous for men and ships to sail in safety. For much of the medieval period, this was the case. Most shipping took place in the Mediterranean or much further north in the Atlantic, between, for example, England and France. What we do find when we look at medieval culture, however, is a consistent fascination with foreign regions and foreign cultures. We see this with the Crusades, we see this with the Pax Mongolica, we even see this with the Vikings. And so over the course of the medieval period, people in European society become more and more interested in cultures, regions, products, languages coming from outside their society. However, as we come to the end of the 14th century that we looked at last week and entering into the 15th century, it is becoming more and more difficult for them to gain access to these foreign lands. So the Pax Mongolica collapses because of the Black Death. That makes it much more difficult to trade in these regions. And then the Ottomans establish an empire in the Eastern Mediterranean that is much more hostile to Christian missionaries and traders than the Mongol regimes had been. And so at the exact same time, the Europeans are more interested in learning about Asian and foreign cultures than they had ever been before. These cultures seem to be more and more closed off from them than before. However, we're going to see a different force come to power at the opposite end of the Mediterranean that will drive and harness this European interest in learning about other cultures. And this comes from the western end of the Mediterranean. This comes from the Iberian Peninsula and the kingdoms of Spain and Portugal. You'll remember that early on in the medieval period, there were Islamic conquests that were very successful in taking over most of Spain, but that there were holdout Spanish kingdoms that survived in the mountains in the north. Over the course of the medieval period, these Christian kingdoms in Spain become more and more powerful at the expense of the Muslim rulers in southern Spain. Finally, in 1492, the Spanish kingdoms are going to complete, the Christian Spanish kingdoms that is, are going to complete the restoration of the Spanish peninsula, so it's now fully under Christian control and under Christian rule. So you have Christian rulers in Spain and Christian rulers in Portugal. This is important because it means that you now have a powerful kingdom that's united, at least politically united, that's on the edge of Western civilization, on the edge of Europe, that's going to be looking to expand outwards and increase its influence, and its culture is going to be looking outwards to learn about other regions outside of its own borders. And so we're going to see that first the Portuguese and then the Spanish are going to lead the great voyages of European discovery. The Portuguese, under the leadership of Henry the Navigator, Prince Henry the Navigator, are going to start to sponsor voyages that explore the west coast of Africa. Now, there's a common misconception that the African kingdoms that the Portuguese were encountering were poor and primitive and couldn't stand up for themselves. This is not true. These were well-developed and sophisticated kingdoms, and the Portuguese would not have been able to develop a land empire here. They would not have been able to defeat these African kingdoms. And so instead, the Portuguese era of exploration is going to be an era of establishing small enclaves on the edges of the African coast, where they can carry out trade with the different African kingdoms that they are coming in contact with. So we see the Portuguese establishing this trading network and extending it further and further south down the coast of Africa until they finally cross into the Indian Ocean, and they establish trading networks along the east coast of Africa and as far away as India. One story that it's important to mention is that when the Portuguese one of the first Portuguese voyages to cross into the Indian Ocean, made land in one of the harbors along the east coast of Africa. They were shocked to find that their ship was the smallest and the scruffiest of all the ships in the harbor. They realized that they were coming on a trading network connecting Arabia and India and East Africa that had existed for a long time, that these cultures were significantly more wealthy and sophisticated than they were. And so this is a really important window for us into the balance of the world and global civilizations at this time. We're used to Western civilization being a dominant civilization in the globe. It certainly was not in the year 1500. At this time, the sophistication and the stability, the wealth of Western countries, European countries, was far behind that of many of the countries and kingdoms to be found in East Africa and India and other parts of Asia and the Middle East. So just important to keep that perspective in mind. The Spanish voyages are going to be focused on the New World and on the Americas. And this discovery is, of course, going to be led by Christopher Columbus, someone whose plans to reach Asia by sailing to the east had been rejected by most European kingdoms who were unwilling to sponsor this plan, not because they thought the world was flat, as some people have suggested, but actually because they knew that Columbus' math was incorrect, that he was miscalculating ancient Greek forms of measurement, and they knew that his fleet would run out of provisions long before it reached Asia. However, they were not aware of the two great American continents that stood in the way. And Columbus is going to make landfall on these continents, and this is going to initiate a period of Spanish exploration and conquest in the New World, which is a subject for History 1160 rather than 1150, and the second half of the survey of Western civilization. However, with Columbus making landfall in the West Indies, discovering the Americas for Europeans at the time, with the Portuguese discovering a sea route to India, establishing connections throughout Africa, the world has been changed forever, and this balance across the globe of different civilizations has also been changed forever. We're going to see what's known as the Columbian Exchange, with goods from Africa, the Americas, and Europe being interchanged with one another. We're going to see Christianity become the religion in the world with the most adherents, and we're going to see Western civilization become the most influential culture across the world. And that's going to come with great achievements, but also great challenges and disappointments, which you'll get to begin to explore in this unit, and hopefully in future classes that study later periods in the history of Western civilization.